I was somewhat taken back, Mr. Vice President, by your listing of current environmental problems attributed to global warming. You did miss a few, though. The Dallas Cowboys have not won a playoff game in 10 years. You didn't mention that. And you also, as Mr. Markey pointed out to me, the New England Patriots didn't make it to the Super Bowl. I would add those to the list of problems that you enumerate. I do want to directly go to one of the problems that you talked about. You talked about CO2 concentrations rising in the oceans and the effect that that is or could be having. I have a book here called CO2 Global Warming in Coral Reefs by Dr. Craig Idso, who has a magazine that he publishes each month called CO2 Science. And I'm going to read the summary from the book, and I'll put it in the record. The rising CO2 content of the atmosphere may induce changes in ocean chemistry pH that could slightly reduce coral calcification rates, but potential positive effects of hydrospheric CO2 enrichment may more than compensate for this modest negative phenomenon. Theoretical predictions indicate that coral calcification rates should decline as a result of increasing CO2 concentrations by as much as 40% by the year 2100. However, real-world observations indicate that elevated CO2 and elevated temperatures are having just the opposite effect. In light of the above observations and in conjunction with all the material presented, it is clear that climate alarmist claims of impending marine species extinctions due to increases in both temperature and atmospheric CO2 concentration are not only not supported by real-world evidence, they are actually refuted by it. Now, I just put that into the record to point out that some of the phenomena that you indicate are obviously occurring. If they're occurring, they're occurring. But to lay that at the feet of global warming is not substantiated by the science. And some of these alarmist predictions are just that. They're predictions. They will not be fact. Now let's get to some things that are fact. We know that the United States each year creates man-made CO2 emissions in the neighborhood of 7 billion metric tons, 7 billion. If you cost that man-made CO2 at $100 a ton, which most of the experts who've looked at the cap and trade system say that the tons cost is going to be between 100 and 200 billion. If you take the $100 a ton number, that's $700 billion a year. Now, my friend Mr. Markey and Mr. Waxman are engaging in some trading right now. They're trying to give free allowances to perhaps get votes. I won't say they're doing that, but it appears to me that they're doing that. So they're going to give some allowances away. Let's say they give 3.5 billion tons of allowances away. That still means that there's going to be 3.5 billions of tons that have to be costed. Let's say that we take the EPA estimate that it's only $20 a ton, not 100. I think it's going to be a lot more than 20, but we'll take the EPA number. That's still, if they give away half the allowances and they only cost $20 a ton, that number is $70 billion a year. How in the world can we have a cap and trade system that doesn't cost jobs and doesn't cost the economy, even if it is only half the tons at $20 a ton?
Congressman Barton, I want to address the point that you made about the science. I don't question your sincerity for one moment.
And I don't question yours, so we're equal on that.
Thank you. I believe that it's important to look at the sources of the science that we rely on. With all due respect, I believe that you have relied on people you have trusted who've given you bad information. I don't blame the investors who trusted Bernie Madoff, but he gave them bad information.
I've never talked to Bernie Madoff.
I'm not saying that you have. But he gave them bad information and committed a massive fraud that ended up hurting most of all the people who trusted him. Senator Warner made reference in his opening statement to the story on the front page of the New York Times this morning. Absolutely incredible. The largest corporate carbon polluters in America, 14 years ago, asked their own people to conduct a review of all this science. And their own people told them what the international scientific community is saying is correct. There is no legitimate basis for denying it. Then, these large polluters committed a massive fraud far larger than Bernie Madoff's fraud. They are the Bernie Madoffs of global warming. They ordered the censoring and removal of the scientific review that they themselves conducted. And like Bernie Madoff, they lied to the people who trusted them in order to make money. And the CEO of the largest, if I could just finish my response, Congressman.
Look, I will stipulate that CO2 concentrations are going up. There's no debate about that. They're about 380 parts per million, and they're going to rise to in the neighborhood of 500 parts per million in the next 50 to 100 years. I'll stipulate that. Now, the consequences of that, and whether that's because of man-made CO2, I think are debatable. And I don't know about this scientific peer review that you just talked about, but if somebody lied about something 14 years ago, I'm sure Mr. Waxman and Mr. Markey will conduct an investigation and oversight hearing into that. My question to you was about the cost of the allowance system. How are we going to pay for it, and how many jobs are we going to lose? Now, if you've got information about something that happened 14 years ago, I'm sure, again, our chairman and subcommittee chairman, Mr. Stupak, who's the oversight subcommittee chairman, will look at it. But answer my question about the cost, please.
It's on the front page of the New York Times today by Andrew Revkin. The leading corporate carbon polluters themselves conducted a review of this science and found that it's valid. And to the point you made a moment ago, they verified in their own studies that man-made global warming is raising temperatures and causing this crisis. Like Bernie Madoff, they lied about it in order to make money, and they themselves profited. The CEO of the largest got a one-time payment of $400 million. Now, again, those who have trusted them and believed them are due an apology. These corporations ought to apologize to the American people for conducting a massive fraud for the last 14 years.
Gentleman's
My time has expired, Mr.
Gentleman's
Chairman.
time has expired.